And this week's quote comes from Henry Hazlitt. He was an American journalist who wrote about business and economics for publications that you may have heard of once or twice, like the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times and Newsweek or The Nation or the American Mercury, like all over the place. He wrote about business and finance. And here is what he said once. He said this: inflation is a form of tax, a tax that we all collectively must pay. And boy, we're feeling the impact of that tax here lately, aren't we, Mike?
We are absolutely feeling the impact, and we have since COVID. I mean, we've called it the silent tax, but I don't know that it's really that silent. When groceries have risen 343% just since COVID started in 2020. I read earlier today that the average family needs an extra $11,000 a year just to pay for the increase in their grocery bill. I mean, that's huge. But pre-retirees and retirees both need to factor inflation into their retirement planning process, because it can absolutely erode the purchasing power of their savings as well as their income over time. And folks, here is why inflation matters. I would assume that most of you want to maintain your standard of living into retirement. The sad reality is that inflation causes the cost of goods and services to increase over time. And if your income remains static while the prices of goods and services rise, you might find it increasingly challenging to be able to afford that same standard of living. And so therefore, factoring in inflation helps ensure that you can sustain your lifestyle throughout retirement. That's one way. Another way is the risk of longevity. Now, people are like, what? The risk of longevity? I want to live as long as I possibly can, as long as my mind and my body and my money will last. Well, the fact of the matter is that retirees are living longer than ever before, which means that the retirement savings needs to last longer than ever before. And over the course of a 30 to 40 year plus retirement, inflation can absolutely diminish the value of your savings if they're not growing at a rate that outpaces inflation. So that's another way. Yet another way, and we've talked about this a lot on our show, is healthcare, right? Healthcare expenses tend to rise faster than general inflation does. And so retirees are often facing increasing medical costs as your body starts to break down, which makes it essential to account for healthcare inflation in your retirement planning process. And failing to do so can leave you vulnerable to unexpected healthcare expenses. Well, then we have this thing called Social Security benefits, right? And while Social Security provides a valuable source of retirement income, the COLAs, or cost of living adjustments, may not fully keep pace with inflation. And as a result, retirees that rely on Social Security alone may see a reduction again in purchasing power over time if they don't account for inflation in their planning. And then those smart folks who are not just saving but investing for the future, inflation can absolutely have an impact on investment returns as well. And so if you're relying on that investment income, you might find that your returns are also diminished by inflation, particularly if you've invested in assets that have low returns or fail to adjust their investment strategy to account for that silent tax known as inflation. So overall, failing to consider inflation in retirement planning can lead to a gradual erosion of your purchasing power, and making it essential for both pre-retirees as well as retirees to factor in inflation into your financial plan.
Yeah, and this is why I think we talk about having a comprehensive plan where you are going to be set no matter what. Like a few years ago, inflation had been just super low for a super long time. I mean, since we came out of the 2008 financial crisis, inflation had been down, at or below the Fed's 2% target, which is what they want to see on an annual basis. It had been at or below that level for the entire time leading up to COVID, pretty much. So, we were spoiled in a lot of ways. And so a lot of people might not have even been thinking about inflation when they were planning for their future. But now, wake up call, folks. You got to have a plan that's comprehensive.
You do, and by implementing strategies to mitigate inflation's impact, people can better ensure a much more financially secure retirement.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to get started on along that road, folks, moneymatterswithmike.com is the website. That's moneymatterswithmike.com. Or you can call him at 704-560-1573, 704-560-1573.